Well, good afternoon, everybody. We are here again for another Technical Advisory Committee meeting, or meeting of the two. I'm out of practice. The two Technical Advisory Committees of the Turlock Subbasin, both the East and the West. Turlock Subbasin GSA Tax. Welcome. I have on the screen here the reminders that you've seen before. We're all Zoom pros by now, and it looks like our participant lists, our list is going down since the GSP has been adopted and submitted to the Department of Water Resources, but we still have people on the phone, but probably a less likelihood of any problems with less people in terms of mics and all of that. So just perform that normal Zoom etiquette. I'll note that we're recording the meeting and it's going to be put on the website sometime later on tonight or early tomorrow once we're concluded. And then also I'm in the process during the meeting of getting the meeting materials other than the agenda posted on the website on the event page for today's meeting. There's a couple presentations that are going to be presented, so I'll get those up during the meeting most likely. So with that, I yield to Michael and others.
Thank you, Herb. Good afternoon and welcome everybody to the Joint Technical Advisory Committee meeting of the West Turlock Subbasin Technical Advisory Committee and the East Turlock Subbasin Technical Advisory Committee meeting. Our first item on the agenda, or second item on the agenda, is call to order. For the West Turlock, who I represent, I need 7 members, and I see we have myself and a number of others from Turlock Irrigation District, Leandro from Delhi, Miguel from City of Modesto, Christy from Stanislaus County, Carlos from the City of Turlock, Karen from Ceres, Michelle from Keys. Have I missed anybody from the West Turlock GSA? I don't think so. With that, we have a quorum, and I call to order the meeting of the West Turlock GSA Technical Advisory Committee at 2:02 p.m. Over to you, Sarah Wolf.
Thank you, Michael. Sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties. Would somebody who can see the screen, can you tell me, or could the East Turlock TAC members that are on, please identify yourselves so we can know if we have a quorum or not?
Matt Beeman with Merced Irrigation District.
Dennis Otsuya Belico Cortez.
I'm Christy McKinnon.
Thanks. Okay. So we have Matt Beeman, Dennis Yotsua, and Christy McKinnon, and myself, Sarah Wolf, from the East Turlock, and that gives us a quorum.
Okay, wonderful. So item number 3 is public participation. This is the time set aside for members of the public to directly address the technical advisory committees on any item of interest to the public that is within our subject matter jurisdiction. You can speak on any item now, or alternatively wait until, if there's a specific agenda item, you can wait until the item appears on the agenda. So with that, is there any public participation? Hearing none, I'm checking for hands. Don't see any hands raised. So again, we'll move past public participation and on to item number 4, which is an action item, the approval of the minutes. So we have the minutes of the January 4th special joint meeting and the January 27th regular joint meeting of the West and East Turlock Technical Advisory Committees. And so those were emailed out earlier in the week. People had a chance to review those. And at this time, I'd entertain a motion to either approve them or approve them with any edits or amendments. So over to the West Turlock TAC group. Is there a motion to approve or amend?
Oh, motion, Michael. Well done.
Thank you. Andrew, so Landra from Delhi's motion to approval of those 2 sets of minutes. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second from Karen at Series. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, those minutes stand approved unanimously. Over to you, Sarah, for the East Turlock.
Thank you. So for the East Turlock, we need a motion to approve the minutes from January 4th and January 27th. And so can I get a motion to approve those minutes?
This is Dennis. I'll move.
Thank you, Dennis. A second?
I wasn't present for January 4th, so I'm not sure if how my motion will work, but otherwise I'll second.
Okay, I think it's okay, Matt. So we'll have a first from Dennis and a second from Matt, and I'll do a roll call vote. Dennis Yatsua,
Yes.
Matt Beeman,
Yes.
Christy McKinnon,
Yes.
and Sarah Wolf, yes, motion carries.
Okay, wonderful. Those two sets of minutes stand approved by both technical advisory committees. So moving on to item number 5, this is an action by the West Turlock GSA only, or the TAC only for the West Turlock GSA. And this is a resolution recognizing the state of emergency proclaimed by the governor on March 4th, 2020, which remains in effect, and reauthorizing remote teleconference meetings of the West Turlock GSA TAC for the period of March 4th through April 3rd. Again, this is to allow us to continue to do remote meetings like this, and we do get better public participation due to the ongoing emergency by the governor. So we've seen this one a few times before. With that, we have a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Debbie. A motion from Debbie at TID. Do you have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Karen. Otherwise, we have to do it in person. So this is a resolution. We have to do a roll call vote. So with that, as clerk Jennifer Land, could you call the roll, please?
Thank you, Chair. Member Alvarez,
Yes.
Member Guerrero,
Yes.
Member Harris, did we lose Michelle? There we
She
go.
said yes in the
Yes.
comments.
Very good. I just saw that. Thank you so much. Member Maldonado,
Yes.
Member Montalbano,
Yes.
Member McKinnon,
Yes.
Vice Chair Morgan,
Yes.
and Chair Cook.
Yes, I note that Mike Pickock is with us now too.
Oh, very good.
Yes, I'm here now.
Very good, Mike. Would you also like to, were you on soon enough to where you would like to vote on this item as well?
Which item was it?
And this is item 5, the resolution for the reauthorization of the remote teleconference meetings.
I'll vote yes.
Very good. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
So with that, the resolution stands approved unanimously. Okay, moving on to item number 6, letter of support. Consider recommending the technical advisory committees provide a letter of support to the East Stanislaus Resource Conservation District for their grant application to fund a watershed coordinator. And I'll hand it over to Debbie with Turlock Irrigation District.
Hi, hold on just a second. Let me put on the video. Trina with the East Stanislaus Resource Conservation District is planning on calling in and talking about the grant that they're applying for and wishing to have a letter of support for. I don't see her on yet unless she's one of the phone numbers. And if she isn't, then I would suggest maybe we skip this item and then come back to it once she's been able to join.
Okay, sounds good, Debbie. So I don't know if Madam Clerk has to take action, but is it okay to move this item towards the end of the agenda? What's the process for that?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think it's fine. You can either do a motion and second to take it later on in the meeting, or I can just make a note and reflect in our minutes that we were going to hear this item at a later date once the presenter was on the call. So either option would be fine.
Yeah, I think just make a note, because I know with Zoom, it's doing these votes can be a little bit challenging. So let's just make a note. We'll move this to the end if it's okay with everybody, and wait for Trina to show up from East Stanislaus RCD. Okay, so with that,
Absolutely.
move to the end or towards the end of the meeting. And with that, we move straight to number 7, which is the Groundwater Sustainability Plan Annual Report Update. This is informational update on the status and content of the GSP Annual Report. Over to you, Debbie.
Fabulous. Let me see if I can share my screen. Share that. Let's see. So can you see this? It should say annual report at the top. I just wanted to briefly update the group on the schedule and the process that we're going through to develop our first annual report.
At 2:45, I think. So 2:30.
Oh, thank you. So the consultant team is continuing to take the information that we provided and put it into the format that will be needed for the annual report. Remember that the focus of this first annual report is really updating the data sets and information that we have within the GSP. It's not focused on implementation of the GSP. That'll be the focus of the next annual report. So really we're updating the data sets within the GSP through water year 2021, which is the end of September 2021. And so that's really our focus as we move forward with developing this first annual report. The schedule is listed here. I kind of highlighted those items that are specific to the TAC. So we will be sending out to the TAC a draft table of contents. You can kind of see what items are being worked through and how it's going to look as we prepare the annual report. The consultant team will be meeting with a small group of the staff from essentially both GSAs to work through an approach, and then we'll be circling back to the TAC with the draft of the annual report mid-March on the 11th. We'll have an opportunity to talk with some of the consultant teams about what we see, and so we can get feedback from the TAC and work through some of those items at that meeting. And then final comments are due from the TAC on the 18th, because we need to finalize the document for submittal to DWR before April 1st. And we'll be having a public conversation about the findings at the TAC meeting on the 24th. So that will be next month. So there's a lot to do between now and then. But that's the approach that we've put together. If you recall, as we developed the scope for the annual report, there were several other TAC meetings and other things that were incorporated into the budget, but we tried to pare it down. And so we reduced the number of meetings to accomplish that. And so this was the approach that seemed to work. So that's my update. You should be seeing something tomorrow on the table of contents, and then mid-March. If there's anyone within the TAC that wishes to be a part of that working group that we've been putting together, please let me know, and we can add you into that. Right now, it's essentially the same individuals that worked through the GSP process. And so it seemed to be a good mixture of both ag and urban and east and west, small and larger, kind of entities. But again, let me know if any of the TAC members would like to be a part of that, and then we can try and get you fit into that group as well. Any questions?
Debbie, I was just going to add, we discussed how we let the board know about this and whether board action is required. Maybe just let the group, just for the good of the group, understand that process too.
Yes, so it's my understanding that for most agencies, because the annual reports are due by a specific time, a lot of times what will happen is there'll be a report to the boards after the annual report has been submitted. So because of the timelines and the constraints, that's the approach that most GSAs have taken. And that was the approach that we were suggesting, unless there are concerns with that, in which case we could schedule a GSA meeting to a joint GSA meeting, I should say, to facilitate that, rather than having it at the TAC level. It could be a combination if there was a desire to take it to the GSAs instead. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, I think just for the good of the group, the thought was it's more of an administrative action than a discretionary action, and therefore review by the board would not necessarily be necessary before we filed our annual report with DWR. And that sometimes it gets confusing if you take an item to a board where you're not really asking for any advice or input, or just a rubber stamp. So the thought was, let's keep our regular scheduled meetings with the boards. Let's get this annual report in, and then we'll report to the board about what was in it at their meeting. So they wouldn't have to, be concerned about a special meeting to take action on an item they really don't need to take action on.
Thank you, Michael. That's probably a better explanation than mine. Also, I do believe that so we're trying to make sure that we meet the deadline, and there is an opportunity to amend a report should there be additional information that needs to be provided, or the board wishes to add something or something like that. So there is potential to make adjustments.
There you go, Debbie. Thank you for that. Any other further questions for Debbie? I do note that Trina has joined us. And so, Trina, we did kind of move ahead with our meeting a little bit, and we can go back to your letter of support. So this was, again, we'll go back to item number 6, if that's okay with everybody. A letter of support, consider recommending the tax provider letter of support to the East Stanislaus Resource Conservation District for a grant application regarding a watershed coordinator. So again, Debbie and Trina, over to you guys. Debbie, do you want to just introduce Trina real quick? There you go.
Yes. Oh, and you're unmuted now. Okay, good. So Trina is with the East Stanislaus Resource Conservation District, and she has been working on obtaining a grant with some of the other resource conservation districts within the valley to hire and fund a watershed coordinator, which would then provide some additional opportunities for this region. And so the tax applied or submitted a letter of recommendation for the RCDs last year for an alternative approach to funding something like this. But they were unfortunately unsuccessful in receiving that grant. And so they're looking at a different grant. And so Trina's here to talk about what that grant process is, and what it might entail, and what the ask is. So Trina, over to you.
Okay, thank you for that introduction, Debbie. I don't think I've actually attended any of these meetings yet. I usually have staff that attends, but I see a couple of partner names on the list of attendees that have worked with the RCD in the past. So Hopefully you guys are aware of what your local resource conservation district does. We are a local government entity special district that works to bridge the gap between our federal, state, and provide representation for our landowners to meet the needs that comes down the pipeline to them. So we have been for several years now. We previously had a watershed coordinator, Chester Anderson, that worked on the middle and lower San Joaquin River watershed that was funded under the Department of Conservation. That funding program ended and there has not been a replacement fund in its place at this time. And so we've been looking other places for funding to continue the watershed coordination. And last year's attempt was through the Bureau of Reclamation that has a collaborative watershed funding program. And so according to the Bureau of Reclamation, a watershed group is a self-sustaining, non-regulatory, consensus-based group that is composed of a diverse array of stakeholders, which may include, but is not limited to, private property owners, nonprofit organizations, federal, state, local agencies, and tribes. So the RCDs, as your local representation, we are non-regulatory, are looking to lead the effort of bringing together our said watershed group. We have a very large hydrologic region. The San Joaquin River hydrologic region covers San Joaquin County all the way to Fresno County. But over the last 2 or 3 years, we've been really working well with our counterparts in the other counties. And we feel like we're in a really good position right now to lead an effort to bring together all of the interests across the San Joaquin Valley to really bring some meaningful conversations to the table through this collaborative effort. The funding that the funding we're applying for is basically the same that we asked for under Bureau of Reclamation. Bureau of Reclamation is a nationwide funding pool, and so we were competing against a lot of others in that. So unfortunately, we were not selected for funding. The funding pool we are applying for this year is California only. It is through the California Office of Emergency Services, and that was coordinated by our California Association of Resource Conservation Districts to allow for the RCDs to apply to it. And it's ultimately funding that comes through FEMA. FEMA is really kind of changing their mode of operation, and they want to start putting a little bit more money into the resiliency efforts and being prepared. And so a lot of the conservation that can be done in the San Joaquin Valley kind of relates directly to that, as we're susceptible to drought and flooding. So our end goal in this is ultimately the collaboration that will bring all of the partners to the table. We do want to create a watershed management plan. It's not something like your groundwater management plan that's required. It's more looking at all of the water uses, restoration, recharge, and finding cooperative projects that can help better manage our watershed as a whole. One of our big reasons for doing this is it's going to increase access to funding that is only available to regions that have the above mentioned management plan. So some of these that I've come across in my searching for grant funding is the Strategic Growth Council, anything that related to climate smart agriculture, Bureau of Reclamation, and then now this will also open us up to FEMA funding that will be coming down in the future. So the specific funds are through FEMA, and so it's for drought and flood resiliency and preparedness. So we are including, in addition to the management plan and the collaborative effort, is 10 conservation plans that will showcase how our agricultural users what they can do to address water and soil conservation to meet the greater watershed goals. So we are looking for letters of support from various entities that this could impact, and ultimately we want to see us in a position to bring more implementation of much needed projects from infrastructure and restoration to floodplains and on-farm recharge. And I tried to keep it short and sweet.
Thank you, Trina. Debbie, did you want to add anything?
No, I just wanted to thank Trina for that. And to, I guess, remind the group. So at least for the West Turlock, that our board has authorized the TAC to submit comment letters and letters of support and those types of things, so long as everyone was on the same page with respect to that. So that's why I'm bringing it to the TAC for consideration and discussion. Trina has provided a draft letter that could be submitted and articulated as the board chairs see fit. So that's where it is. Michael?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. I was just going to add that many moons ago, when the technical advisory committees first got started, we developed a process for letters of recommendation, and basically was or letters of support. We get like this. We're just generally making comments as a group that we would bring it to the technical advisory committee. If we had kind of unanimous consent, then we could send a letter. If there was some type of discontent or discord amongst the group, then it would go to the board, and the boards would decide whether we participated or not. So what I'd like to do is obviously take a motion for the West Turlock to see if there is interest in providing a letter of support for Trina and the East Stan RCD for this grant application. And if there is, we'll just got a template letter, we'll modify that and get it sent as quickly as possible. If not, we'll go to the board, but I don't think that would meet your deadline, Trina, for the application. So that would be a way to kind of end the process. So with that, do you have any questions from the group in general about what Trina is asking for in the East Stan RCD and that type of thing? It's a quiet group today. I'll start calling people out. But hearing no further questions or comments, this is an action item, is a motion. And so the recommended action for the West Turlock GSA TAC is to authorize us to send a letter of support to the East Stanislaus Resource Conservation District for the grant application to fund a watershed coordinator. So with that, do we have someone who wants to make a motion?
I'll make
Michael, this is me.
Oh, let Miguel do it. That's fine.
I'll second Karen's.
Okay, so I'll motion to provide a letter of support to the East Stanislaus Resource Conservation District for the grant application to fund a watershed coordinator.
Perfect. That sounds like Miguel, you second that motion?
Yes.
As the song says. Okay. So with that, for the West Turlock, this is take action now. So all those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that motion stands approved. Over to you, Sarah, for the East Turlock.
Thank you, Michael. Can I get a similar motion from the East Turlock so that the GSA can send a joint letter on this?
Excuse me, Sarah, this is Jessie Johnson. I'm not sure that the EPS GSA is a similar procedure.
Okay.
Where
What
the
do we
tax
do?
is delegated authority to approve a letter of support.
Do you know what our
So
procedure is?
I do not off the top of my head, but I believe we may have to take it back to our board for full consideration. I don't think we've set up a separate policy for this.
Okay.
So we might have to, bring this back.
Michael, just out of curiosity, maybe help get the question answered. You mentioned earlier that early on it was set up that the TAC could recommend, and then if it wasn't approved, it would go to the full board. Was that just on your side, on the east side, I'm assuming?
I know we did that for the west side. Does anyone remember what the east
I'm sorry.
process was?
I meant.
I assumed that it both were provided, but I could be wrong. We have done this in the past. If I recall correctly, it's gone to both GSA tax, or for consideration. But I'll have to rely upon East Turlock.
Is it possible to go ahead and vote anyways, even if it might be incorrect, so that if it is correct, we can move forward with the letter?
I like that idea, Karen. Jesse, do you think that's a possibility for us?
Yeah, or another option is we could potentially, or if the TAC chooses to approve it, the GSA can ratify that action. GSA full board.
The letter, I think, is the grant application is due on Monday. So there's a short timeline, unfortunately.
Yeah.
There is a short time.
Why don't we why don't we go
Sarah?
ahead and, oh yeah, Dennis, go ahead.
I think the East Side Board has some kind of policy. It was done quite a while ago. Lauren might remember, but I don't remember the details. But I think it had to do with you could do it and be ratified, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, I think I just walked over to Lauren's office and confirmed that the ratification process would be acceptable. So I think it would still be okay to approve it today, and then the GSA board can ratify the action at their next meeting.
But we have to send a letter before Monday. So can we authorize the writing the letter and have it be ratified? I don't know if that's.
I believe we can ratify after the fact, after it's been submitted.
As much as it would be great to have both sign on, just having at least one of the groundwater basins. Some of the other letters of support we're getting is River Partners for the restoration and floodplain element is providing one. Madera Department of Water Resources is providing one. So we have a various stakeholders that would be impacted by this project that are providing one. So if we have the one, then I think as nice as it would be to have both, it sounds like it's a lot of trouble, and just the one would be at least sufficient for the grant program.
Okay.
Sarah, if I can add just a quick point of clarification and I'm sorry, I may not have all of the pieces to the puzzle, but going back and looking, we took a similar action on January 14th of 2021. So I've pulled up the meeting minutes, and it looks like there was a joint action by both the West Turlock and East Turlock GSA tax to approve and recommend a letter of support signed by the chairs of the ETS and the WTS GSA tax to the East Stanislaus Resource Conservation District regarding a grant application to fund a watershed coordinator. There was no opposition from either of the tax. The chairs declared the joint motion carried. Now, the piece that I don't know is that whether that went back to the East Turlock board for ratification. I looked at the succeeding agenda for the board, and I didn't see anything on that particular agenda. Not to say that there wasn't something that either transpired before or after, but I just wanted to provide some light on the last action that was taken for this similar item.
Thanks,
Thank
Debbie.
you, Jennifer.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, Jennifer. It is my understanding that it can be ratified by the full board even after it has been submitted, and I suppose, yes, the chair of the tax can sign on behalf of the GSA board. Or
Yeah,
the tax,
I would,
rather.
if the other TAC members from the East are comfortable with it, I think we should move forward with supporting it and then bring it to next month's meeting for ratification from the full GSA board.
Okay, I'll move to provide a letter of support. This is Dennis.
Thank you, Dennis. Is there a second?
I'm happy to second. This is Matt.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks, Matt. Okay, I'm going to do a roll call vote. Dennis,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Christy,
Yes.
and Sarah, yes. Motion carries. So, and then we'll bring it back to our full board for ratification after the fact.
Wonderful. Thank you, Trina, for bringing this to us, and Debbie for your work, and then everybody just working our way through that together. It's been such a long time since we've done this, so hopefully in the future we'll get our processes figured out, and also encourage people to get this stuff to us as soon as possible so we don't bump up against these deadlines. Okay.
Yes,
Thank you,
and thank
Trina.
you for your consideration. Hopefully I'll have good news to bring back to you guys. I had also talked to Debbie. There may be some on-farm recharge projects that we might be able to bring to the table in the near future. There's pilot projects going on in Madera, so we're watching that situation closely and hopefully can report to you guys some good news coming from the RCD front.
Great.
Sounds good.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you, Trina.
Thank you.
Okay, so that was item 6. We already did item 7. So that means we're moving back to item 8, which is the monitoring event scheduled for March 2022. And this is just discussion and coordination amongst the various agencies regarding the first monitoring event under the GSP, scheduled to be conducted March 14th through 25th or thereabouts. And Karen, you're taking the lead on this, so over to you.
Hey there, guys. So it's coming up to our first monitoring event in March. And we also have going on at the same time the airborne electromagnetic survey that DWR is doing. So we're going to talk about the survey first, and I'm going to let Steve Carlton take over and explain to us what this is and why taking the groundwater levels at the same time is important.
Thanks, Karen. What I don't have is control of changing slides.
Herb will do that for you if you just tell him
Okay,
when.
great. Basically, this is just an introductory slide from the November 2021 AEM presentation by DWR. And to get to the meat of it, Herb, go to the next slide. The value of the AEM, just to review, is hydrostratigraphic. It also can help identify areas of recharge. You have the ability to see water quality data also, areas of high dissolved solids. And then also you can see in the lower left-hand corner that you can identify areas of thick sequences of clay that are susceptible to compaction. So this fits into a lot of different things associated with a GSP. Next slide. So in November, DWR provided us with kind of their rationale behind why they're doing it, and then their draft flight lines. In the upper left-hand corner is the, like an excerpt from their November presentation. And it shows the flight lines that they were going to fly or proposing to fly over the area. They'd asked for input to their proposed flight lines. And we did provide that back then. And we said, well, there are 4 main areas where we're interested in acquiring data. And that would be in the mountain front, through Turlock Lake, along the Tuolumne, Merced, and San Joaquin rivers. And then in addition to that, running complete cross sections through the area to evaluate the occurrence of the Corcoran clay. And their proposed grid back in November, we could kind of live with it. The revised grid, and I apologize for the quality of the aerial photograph with this information on it. The new grid is shown in purple lines. And I've identified the basin boundary, but the key takeaway here is that there is more information being collected in the mountain front, more data through Turlock Lake, they've moved the lines to the stream channel, and we now have more cross sections going all the way through the property for identifying the Corcoran clay. We just got a note from DWR today saying that they're going to move the start date back to March 15th from March 4th. So Herb, could you go to the next one? The kind of the positive things I see about the changes to the flight lines is that we have increased density for the mountain front, increased density data around Turlock Lake. The flight lines are going right along the rivers now, so we can have a better understanding of the hydrostratigraphy along the rivers and water levels. And then there's more cross sections across the entire property. The downside is that the urban areas, they appear to increase the area that they're not going to fly. So they're not flying the AEM over urban areas, and compared to their November proposed lines, you know, they really have increased the overall area that they're not going to be flying in the vicinity of Modesto, Ceres, Turlock areas. So there's going to be less information coming back in the urban areas.
Steve, this is Debbie.
Yeah.
Do we have an understanding as to why they removed all those flight lines?
Well, they, you mean the flight lines in the vicinity of the urban areas?
Yeah, on the west, basically. It's like they seem
Yeah.
to just take a chunk of the west and remove them.
Herb, will you go back one slide, please?
So they're just not flying the urban areas. I know that Derek just popped up and had a comment about no flying over the urban areas. Other than the 4 words you put into the chat room, Derek, do you have any other information?
Sorry about that, Steve. That was a little blunt. Because it's for 2 reasons. One is for safety. They don't fly over urban areas for safety, and the second one is because it's electromagnetic. Anything that is electronic will interfere with them. So all the electronics in a urban area prevents them from getting any good data. So there's 2 reasons they don't fly over urban areas.
Yeah, but they basically just like eliminated almost all of the west. They didn't just eliminate urban areas, strangely.
There were additional limitations on flying over livestock, poultry, and power lines. I think I heard vines, and I'm not sure. I didn't really understand vines, but there was a certain set of criteria that they had to follow.
Oh.
Yeah, it's the metal lines that are used to hold vines up, they think interfere quite a bit with their work.
Oh, thank you.
I suppose beggars can't be choosers because they're doing it on the state's dime. So I can't complain. I was just kind of curious why.
And Debbie, if it became critical, you could do the ground-based stuff. They do have the ability to pull sleds or physically walk lines, but then basically what you'd be doing it is along streets, which would probably have the same limitations because of conductive material.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Herb, you can click forward 2. So this is happening concurrent with the water level data. So the water level information for both the east side and the west side is going to be collected basically concurrent. And that has been requested by DWR. They want to have water level data so that they can calibrate their AEM surveys against basically effectively real-time information collected for the depth of water. So the two events are married, and luckily enough, they're doing these surveys right during the time that we're doing the water level surveys. The groundwater monitoring is being, as a part of the GSP to evaluate long-term water level conditions, and they're being collected on a semi-annual basis to align with irrigation pumping cycle. The window basically is going to be from the middle of March through the end of March when we're doing this, so that it is basically kind of all at the same time. And the water level information is informing 3 of the GSP undesirable results: chronic lowering of groundwater levels, reduction in groundwater storage, and interconnected surface water. So, it's key to the 3 of the undesirable result analysis that we're doing under the GSP. And then in addition to that, as I've said, the water level data will be used to support the AM analysis. And next slide. So the monitoring network is, this map shows the monitoring well network along with the boundary of the Corcoran clay. There are 4 types of monitoring wells for the western upper principal aquifer, the western lower principal aquifer, the eastern principal aquifer, and the Sigma monitoring wells. And in talking over this with Mike and Karen, and to a lesser extent with Liz Elliott, the question came up about the Sigma monitoring wells. Specifically, Mike and I would like to, and Karen would like a little bit more clarification on the Sigma monitoring wells. I know that they're going to be used to support contouring, but are they going to be included in the annual reporting? And, is it only going to be support contouring, or they're going to be used for decision process associated with the undesirable results? And that's the question that we have.
Have you given a handle on that?
That is something that we can talk to the consultant team about it. I do think they need to analyze the new data as it relates to the undesirable results. But like I said, that's an opportunity for conversation with the consultant team on Monday. There's a meeting to talk about the approach.
Yeah, I know that they're not used for the measurable objectives or the thresholds. So that's the question. How is the data integrated into the monitoring, and then what's the ramification associated with a GSP? And then just for a little bit of detail, DWR has developed best management practices for collecting the water level data. And, the key things are finding or identifying the location and the elevation, surface elevation. And the BMP provides accuracy criteria for location and land surface elevation. And going through this process, we've identified that some of the wells, the ETS GSA wells, did not meet the land surface elevation criteria. And we're going to be evaluating the need to conduct effectively map grade GPS land surface elevation of the monitoring network. So, it's basically homework for us. And that concludes the discussion on the monitoring.
Steve, this is Mike Tietze. I just wanted to bring up one thing before we close that discussion. I heard Debbie ask about the wide berths that the AEM survey is now giving the urban areas, and from the looks of it, surrounding areas. And we understand, I think, the general rationale that went into that decision, but it does, it did catch our attention that there are farmlands surrounding the cities that are now not being surveyed as well. And what we suspect is that Ramboll doesn't fly helicopters; they contract to do that, and that perhaps they worked with their helicopter contractor. And their helicopter contractor told them where they couldn't go. But I don't think there would be any harm in asking them if they could move, maybe one of the lines from the foothill area and backfill that area that is, longitudinally along the Corcoran Clay a little bit better. And the worst thing that they could do is say, no, we have no flexibility. But that caught our attention as well, Debbie. So I don't think that's a misplaced question or concern. And if you felt that it was necessary, it is something that would be it wouldn't be inappropriate for us to push back and ask about it.
And the flight lines were just released, I think, on the 21st. So it was only 3 days ago that they released the flight lines. I think it would be, if there was a need to or to question the flight lines, it's only been 3 days. So I think that it is viable to come back and say, okay, we just saw it, we had a chance to evaluate it, and we'd like to move one of the northwest southeast lines closer to the urban boundary.
Or ideally, add them back in, because they literally removed a bunch from our subbasin for whatever reason. So that would be my suggested approach rather than eliminating it.
It may as a question of getting in touch with them, just finding out what the rationale overall for what they've done is, and then make suggestions as Steve mentioned.
Because it appears as though on other subbasins, they have like partial lines to, fill in some of those ag areas around the urban areas. And so that may be helpful as we move forward to do recharge and other things, validate our understanding of the subbasin, all of that.
In looking online at this program, it did say that it was going to take about 5 years to do. So do we know if this is the only time they're going over? Yeah.
They're doing it section by section within the state, as I understand. So this is our opportunity. And although we emphasized that we'd like to, understand certain things along the rivers and that sort of thing in our comments, I think they took our comments as though we're not interested in the West, focus everything on the East, perhaps. And that's not necessarily the case.
Well, the East is where we
Yeah,
have
I mean, we
data.
sorry, we did tell them that we were interested in the Corcoran Clay and the edge of the Corcoran Clay, and but if they somehow misinterpreted what we said, it doesn't hurt to ask the question and see if we can get more lines moved back there. I think that as a hydrogeologist, I didn't see it necessarily as being alarming, but it definitely caught my attention. And for characterizing the basin as a whole, to me, especially kind of getting a sense for where is the edge of the Corcoran clay, and having both transverse and longitudinal lines would be helpful there. So it seems like an appropriate question to ask, and based on the concern that I'm hearing, I would suggest that we could take that question to the DWR, or you could, or we could do it jointly. However you feel comfortable doing it.
Well, Steve has been the contact, I think, for the subbasin for this project.
Yeah. And, Debbie, just I can follow up on that and find out if we can, in both the southwest and the northeast areas, where they have really limited data on those northwest, southwest, southeast lines, if we can add some in. I will say that our final analysis, when we sent off our a discussion or the comments to them about the important map areas, our final comment was the Turlock Subbasin Groundwater Sustainability Agencies are comfortable with the existing DWR draft flight lines locations and recommend that they be maintained to the extent possible. So we didn't blow off the other areas.
Oh, I didn't mean to imply that. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think maybe they just said, oh, they're focused on this, because that's what they asked for. They said, where are you focused on? As opposed to, are you happy with what we put together?
Right.
So maybe that's how they interpreted it. I didn't imply that sorry, and I didn't mean to imply that you had conveyed something that you did not.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I can get back to them if that's what the if the request is, that we go back to DWR and see if we can add in some of the northwest southeast lines, because as I look at this, Debbie, it looks like maybe they eliminated 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least 5 lines that are that northwest southeast lineation, and that is a lot of information.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would appreciate that.
Okay.
And before
the worst case is they say no.
Steve, this is
Yeah.
Dennis. Mike alluded to it, but if you look at the two maps of the subbasin, it seems that if they want the edge of the Corcoran clay, they're not going to get it except in Stanislaus County, because the southwest portion is, most of it is west of Bolico, and the eastern lines don't go that far west. So you might look at the two maps you provided, the one from the Sigma and the one with the flight lines.
Okay.
And before we move on, I've been asked to work on the monitoring well program for the West Turlock GSA. So the group will be probably hearing from me as I ask for some data. So I'll be contacting the agencies in the West Turlock GSA for these Sigma wells that we want to have monitored for the dates, and discuss the best management practices so that we're all collecting the data the same. And then I'll work to build on this program over the year and hopefully add a few more monitoring wells. And, maybe we can work on GIS reference points and, screened intervals and all that good stuff. So expect to hear from me.
Thank you, Karen.
Welcome.
So again, I know working with our well sampling guy here, technician here at GID, to go out kind of in that around that time that the AM flights are occurring. I know the East Turlock's going to do the same. So the urban folks, the public water agencies, make sure you can do the same, just so it does help when our sampling period is similar to the AEM flights. Is a good way to kind of calibrate the information the AEM guys pick up. I mean, it's not critical, but it certainly helps a little bit in terms of calibration. If we get those manual measurements and AEM flights around a similar time frame, that would help.
It's just really important that all those manual measurements are taken with the same protocol.
Yes.
And we sent around, I think, the DWR BMP for well sampling. Okay. Well monitoring. Good.
Is there a need to send out information to all of the member agencies regarding the AAM study? I know that TID staff has been trying to gather information from DWR to make it available and what have you, because people may have questions about why is this helicopter flying around that's so low with this thing underneath it. Although I understand that there were letters sent out by DWR to those property owners underneath the flight lines, but there might be some other coordination or information that the member agencies might want. I don't know. That's why I'm asking the question. We have no control over the timeline that they do it or what have you, but okay, well, let us know if there's a need for more information or what have you. I heard from other subbasins that they let the Office of Emergency Services know and those types of things. And I think TID's staff were planning on providing that information to them. But individual agencies may have other things as well.
Yeah. Mike Tietze, you wanted to mention something about the possible monitoring wells in the Modesto subbasin with Miguel along the San Joaquin River. Are you still on?
Yeah, I'm still on. Thank you, Karen. So one of the things that we've been trying to do is gather electric logs, high quality electric logs from wells, preferably that are near flight lines. And so far, we've kind of struck out. We haven't been able to get, private well owners on the east side that we have indirect relationships with to provide those. And on the west side, the wells, municipal wells for which logs may be available, it may still be worth providing those if we can procure some good e-logs for municipal wells, especially longer, deeper ones. But they've removed the flight lines from near where those are in the urban areas. So, but it does occur to me that we have flight lines in the Delta Mendota subbasin and in the Modesto subbasin that intersect at least two locations where there may be good recent e-logs available that I'm aware of. So what we would want to do if we want to try to procure those, because they would help the overall effort, is we'd want to make sure that the GSAs within which those are located are just approach them regarding that request and see if they are okay with it, and then see if we can procure those. And specifically, two locations I'm aware of. One is wells drilled for Stanislaus County at Crow's Landing Airfield, the Crow's Landing Industrial Business Park. There's several high-quality logs there that potentially could be easily made available, and they're very close to flight lines that would help DWR to calibrate their geophysics interpretation in that area. And then I worked on a project for a grower near the San Joaquin River in the Modesto subbasin, and could approach that grower about potentially making the e-logs from his wells available. And if you were willing to do it, that would be, I believe it would be in the Modesto Subbasin. So I'm just wondering how people feel about that. My feeling was if it's easy to do and we communicate transparently about what we're trying to do about the people in whose backyards we're getting the data, it helps everybody. And, you know, maybe it's easy not to be misunderstood. But so I would just offer that and wonder how the tax feel about doing that.
So Mike, if we were to find a whole bunch of e-logs, are you wanting us to email them to you and Steve?
Yes, I think email them to Steve.
Okay.
And Steve can pass them along to DWR.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I'll put Steve's email in the chat box.
Okay. Thank you, Karen. So it sounds like we've got a little bit of follow-up with Steve on getting with DWR and the AEM, and Karen's going to follow up at least with the Westerlo folks on the monitoring stuff. So good. Anything else as we close out number 8, item number 8? Okay, again, it's not an action item.
Well, I guess is it okay if we contact? Maybe we can do this through Christie, because Christie sits on that GSA that Crow's Landing is located in, and if she's agreeable to kind of carry the water for us per se, we can draft you an email, Christie, to send to that GSA and to Dave Lemon and see if we can procure those e-logs at Crow's Landing.
Sure, no problem.
Okay, good. Well, that was easy enough. I used a lot of words to phrase a simple question, I guess. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, everybody. Okay, moving on to item number 9, Groundwater Sustainability Plan Implementation Planning. It's a discussion only regarding the schedule and budget for the implementation of the Groundwater Sustainability Plan, or GSP. Debbie and Mike, you have this one.
Okay, let me see if I could share my screen again. Thank you, Herb. Let's see. Okay, can you see this? Let's see. Oh, this, I think I have it in the wrong order. We're on implementation planning, right? Michael?
That was yes, implementation planning.
Sorry, I can't see the agenda right now because I have this up.
Item 9, yeah.
So what we've been doing kind of in the background is starting to talk through planning and budgeting for this next fiscal year, as you know, what now that the GSP has been submitted. And so so I wanted to make sure that the West Turlock TAC is aware. I think East Turlock TAC may have been meeting a little bit with Sarah and Mike to talk about implementation planning. And so Michael Cook and I have been meeting with them to kind of start talking about that and developing a recommended budget and approach to how we could recommend to our GSA about, you know, how each GSA works together on each of these projects. If you recall, this is a table that's in the GSP, and it includes the different implementation support activities, and then a proposed schedule, and then there's a corresponding table that talks about budget related to that. And so we're starting with that, and then talking through the details associated with each of these support activities and costs and timelines and approaches, and talking through, how the GSAs work together. Do we approach each of these activities or some of these activities jointly, or do we do it individually and then coordinate, and some of those types of things. And I don't have details for you today, but I wanted to make sure that that people were aware of that. And as we move forward, we'll be bringing more details to you and discussion and that sort of thing. So an example of that is development of a data management system. The schedule says that we would do that over the course of the first 2 years of implementation. But it doesn't, the GSPA doesn't talk about whether or not we develop a similar data management system or the same data management system that talks to each other, or we do it jointly or we do it individually. And it's those types of things that we're starting to kind of work through and develop some recommendations to then bring back to this group for conversation, along with budget numbers and that sort of thing. So that's what I had by way of an update. But Mike, I'll turn it over to you. I know you were on the road, but if you had more to add with respect to where Eastside is working towards.
Sure. Yeah. So yes, we are. We have kind of a three-pronged approach, and the leading prong in this case is developing a budget for the fiscal year 22-23, which for us starts on July 1st. And so leading up to that, we want to make sure that we get all of our ducks in a row, so that we're ready to hit the ground running. Working through a budget process on that is not only timely, but it really helps us to get organized with respect to what do we need to get done and how are we going to do it. So, we've developed a 5-year, the start of a 5-year budget with a special focus on the first 3 years and reconciling the forecast or budgeted expenses against various different income sources where, we have a Prop 218 and we have some potential funding from grants or grant reimbursement, but then the remainder would have to come from some kind of a cash call if we are short. So we have that whole analysis is started. We shared it with our TAC this week and with our board this morning. It's a work in progress. We plan to have a workshop and with our TAC or led by our TAC. However, we're also going to, specifically invite our board and the board members of our member organizations, and it will be a public meeting, so anybody's welcome to listen in and participate, and contribute their thoughts. So we are targeting the week after next to do that, and we have not yet set a date, but we will let this group know when that date is set. Our hope is that we can adopt a budget at our end of April board meeting, but failing that, it would be in our end of May board meeting. So we're going to target April, but if there's things to work out, then we'll give ourselves until May. The other two things that we have going is we plan a workshop in April regarding projects, and then a workshop in May regarding management actions. And both of those workshops are going to lead to specific recommendations that we then carry into the following year. That's all.
All right, thank you, Mike, for that. So for those who've involved in planning in the past, usually you adopt the plan and put it on the shelf and walk away. Sigma is not like that, as I've said before. So we do need to work. We're already submitting our first annual report, and we have a lot of work ahead of us. None of this stuff is cheap or free. And I know at least on the west side, we've done a lot of work already to budget accordingly. And I think east side is doing a sterling job too, figuring out, their next steps forward in funding and that type of thing. So again, thank you, Debbie and Mike, for kind of putting this stuff together and figuring out what our next steps are. Any questions or comments about the information that Debbie presented and Mike spoke about? Debbie, remind me, when do we adopt the budget for the GSA, at least for the West Turlock GSA?
Typically, we have adopted it at the May, so the first Tuesday of May, I think, is our regular meeting, so we would adopt it then.
Okay. So in the meantime, we'll work with Treasurer Michael Clipper to bring that stuff forward, obviously hash that out at various TAC meetings to make sure we're on the same page and understand the costs. At least for this year, we adopted a good budget, so we're in good shape for this fiscal year, or the current fiscal year.
And we do have 2 more regularly scheduled TAC meetings between now and then to kind of work through some of these things. So that was the intent.
Perfect. All right.
If there's any comments or suggestions from the member agencies, feel free to reach out to us as we move through this. Sorry, I didn't mean to step on your toes.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys. That takes care of item number 9, GSP implementation planning. Moving on to our final item, number 10, Sigma related items. This is our general catch-all opportunity for members of the technical advisory committees to discuss and provide updates on various Sigma related issues. We have our normal standing bullet points there. We've got the AEM on there too. So maybe let's start with communication outreach. Herb, you have anything on that?
I just have a couple brief items. I think the first one is, we're kind of in a little bit of a lull since the GSP has been submitted to the state after adoption. And so what we're doing right now is updating the GSP website. The homepage and the GSP page have been updated accordingly. We provided links to DWR's GSP portal, or the GSP, the Subbasin page as well. And so we'll update that throughout the process as we continue to get word. Also, what we're doing is we have continued to send email updates with information and meeting invitations, such as the one that most of you received for this meeting, and others. Continue to use social media to get that message out as well. And then lastly, I think the meeting occurred, I think 1 or 2 days prior to the last technical advisory committee meeting, but we worked with the consultants on, and you may hear more on this later, on the public or the program environmental impact report scoping meeting that was held on January 26th. And we held that, per requirement under law. And that was held, and moving on in the process as well throughout the PEIR. There'll be communications that come up. So that's my brief update, unless there are any questions.
Any questions for her? Thank you for the update. Anything to add on the AEM survey for March 2022? We did discuss that as part of monitoring.
Nothing from me.
Okay, and then so we have grants. Anything on the grants?
Yes, I did have an update for the group. The last couple of slides. So let me see if I can pull that up. Thank you, Herb. Let's see one more time. Okay. So I just wanted to kind of update the group about where we've been and where we're going with the PEIR. As we've talked about before, we've gone through the notice of preparation and the scoping meetings. We also had tribal consultation AB 52 comment period that just closed. We did get a couple of requests, and so we're in the process of kind of figuring out how to work through that process, and that's ongoing. There is a project description that has been reviewed by the ad hoc committee and is going to be brought to the tax next week. So be prepared for a document. It's 40 pages or so. It's not huge, but we do want feedback from the TAC. And so this is the opportunity to take a look at the initial project description. And it's this project description that is being used as they're beginning to work on the rest of the administrative draft. And so it's important if there's key information that the TAC member agencies feel need to be incorporated, now is the time to provide that. And so so we're asking for comments by the end of next week, I think. Or yeah, so once it's released, we're asking for 5 business days. So I think it'll be released early next week. And then there's the rest of the development, and there'll be opportunity for comments at the TAC level before the draft public comment period for the PER is started. We're targeting the end of July. It could shift a little bit if it takes longer. If you recall, the grant funding for the draft PEIR requires that everything be completed and wrapped up through the draft by sometime in September, so we could prepare reports and what have you, because all of that has to be submitted to DWR in October. So that's our hard deadline, but we're trying to get it done as quickly as possible. So that's what I have for you. There is some additional work on finalizing the PEIR that would be funded by the GSAs, and that will come to the TAC and the GSAs in the budget that we talked about earlier. So that's all I had. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Debbie? So we're making progress and really trying to nail down that project description, which is kind of the key to the entire document. So thanks for the small group that's working on that. And again, obviously we'll share that with the larger group as documents get produced. Any other thing for the good of the order for the Sigma related updates from members of the group?
Oh,
Michael, this is
sorry, go ahead, Miguel.
since we were on the grant theme, I was going to mention there is that Sigma grant program for the medium and high priority round 2 coming up. The grant solicitation is tentatively scheduled to open on September 2022. The website says there's over 200 million from the general fund and Prop 68 available. Talking to the grant representative, they said that those who didn't get funding for one in the first round are priority for the second round. I still need clarification if that's those that were available to get funding in the first round that did not get it, or us as well become priority. I think it's good for those members that might be thinking of putting in a grant to visit the website and look at the PSPs. It's the same PSP that's already out, so they can now see what kind of project detail and requirements and what point system is out there to see if they have a good candidate project. My understanding, talking from the grant rep, it's going to be a max of 20 million, a minimum of 1 million. So it's always good, to get a head start. And I know it's good for us to, once we have good candidate projects, to discuss which ones, if we put it as a group, to move forward. And again, the sooner the better.
Hey, Miguel, this is Mike with the City of Waterford. Is there an opportunity that you can send me that email so I can just take a look at it?
Yes, I'll send you what I have, Michael.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, so Miguel. Debbie, you were going to say something before Miguel?
Oh, I was just going to say that to report on the rest of the grant projects. We did install the final well last week. We're in the process of going through final walkthroughs, and then that will be completed. So, next week, there'll be the final training session for the GRAP project, and then that will be completed. So, so we are making progress as we move through the final projects.
Sounds good. That's the new wells for the monitoring network for the first sampling. And they're dedicated monitoring wells, which is good. Okay. Anything else from anybody? Okay, hearing not, the next meeting, the next regular scheduled meeting is Thursday, March 24th, 2022. Right now, the plan is to have that remotely, but obviously as the agenda comes out, we'll let you know. And with that, I'll take a motion for adjournment from a member of the West Turlock GSA TAC. Second
Motion,
maybe a
Michael.
lot longer. Who made the motion? Sorry, Miguel.
Leandro.
Oh, Leandro made a motion.
Yeah.
Second, Mike Waterford.
And second, Mike Waterford. All those, so we had a motion second to adjourn the meeting for the West Turlock TAC. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
West Turlock is adjourned. Over to you, Sarah.
Thanks, Michael. Can I get a motion to adjourn the East Turlock TAC?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Matt.
I'll second.
Thanks, Dennis.
Second.
I'll do a roll call. Matt Beeman,
Yes.
Dennis Yatsua,
Yes.
Christy McKinnon. Christy, are you still on?
Yes, hello.
Do you vote in favor of adjourning the meeting?
Yes, please. Thanks, Sarah.
And I, Sarah Wolf, will vote in favor as well. So we are adjourned on the East Turlock side as well.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. See you next time.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.